All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are going to, this presentation will be slightly different as the pre-presentation announcements indicated. It will mostly be question and answers, and if we aren't getting a lot of questions, we have frequently asked questions that we can run through. And if you have questions based on that too, that'll be fine. The main presenter tonight is actually going to be Brian Yang. We wanted to have me and Mike take a step back just because, you know, we are not the only people who push this. You know, the delegates and people who worked on this really hard are not just me and him, obviously. So I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to get their say, as well as people who have questions before we vote this coming weekend on the Chapter 10 rules that we're proposing. So anyway, without further ado, actually, Mike, did you want to say anything before I pass it to Brian?
Yeah, sure, Ryan. Carol, go ahead and put it on the first slide. Yeah, so just some rules of the road for everyone. So as we go through this, you know, as Ryan alluded to, this is all about helping you as a delegate get prepared so you can make the vote that you feel you need to make with regard to the Chapter 10 and the rules that this online play task force has put together. So there's two ways for you to get involved. One is to raise your hand using the icons that are provided as part of the Zoom capability, or you can use the chat feature and type in a question and send us a question. So if you're not quite sure how to phrase your question, you might want to type it in, and we'll try to get all those questions answered. As a matter of fact, the frequently asked questions that are at the back of this, the large majority of them were questions that came up either in the chat or during the discussion in the last time this was presented. But keep in mind that the last focus on this was more geared toward people who were tournament directors or organizers. This is geared to you as a delegate to help you understand what Chapter 10 is about and how to help you figure out what votes you need to make. Thanks, Ryan.
No problem. Okay. So the next thing that I like to say before we start, I said this at the previous town hall and a lot of my correspondence with people, just understand that the rules that we're proposing are like over the board chess and online chess are just different. And so there might be things that you think should happen, you know, in one or the other, but just keep in mind that it's different. And so we had to take that perspective when writing up all this stuff and debating and everything, because it is kind of hard to get away from how things are done because we're not used to the online stuff. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to pass it over to Brian Yang now. And we only have 10 seconds left on the timer for the timekeeper. And it says that I'm a soft-boiled egg if you look at the timekeeper. So, okay.
All right, so next slide, please. So that's just a summary of basically what this meeting is about. Just give you a perspective on the Chapter 10 draft rules, just clarification. So I think that's all for this slide. So that's what Mike and Ryan alluded to. So what's the difference between our old Chapter 10 and this new Chapter 10? Old Chapter 10 are subjective guidelines, while these are actually enforceable rules. So you can actually quote them to your players to say that, hey, I'm going to use this rule. So it also addresses new technology that has been evolving since 2014. And it also uses a lot of TD tips to help explain each rule. So it's not restating of the previous rules. So next slide. And so one thing is that the blitz, quick, and regular time controls are all separate. There's no more dual rated time controls for online time controls. So every time control will be rated separately. There's also a description of how tournament directors should be directing their tournaments. There's talks about 2 cameras or 1 camera, or even just using pure algorithms, or just even holding a small tournament amongst your club people that you used to have weekly meetings with. So there is details on that. Also details on basically how your pairing software won't be the same. You can't use the US chess software sometimes, pairing system method, for these different various servers. Drawn positions that are automatically called, or what if your game is interrupted by your own internet connection failing because of some hurricane or some storm. So all these are different tips on how rules are basically to address how to address each of these unique situations that are played online. So next slide. And so, mouse slips, who's responsible for that? All these different settings on pre-move, auto promotion to a queen perhaps. And again, the emphasis on interrupted games, which I have experience where the server just literally crashed. So how to restart a game with those situations. We also took consideration of players that had special needs and circumstances. And so the use of a game assistance is also incorporated into our Chapter 10 rules. And also the new rating reports. Rating reports usually, we're so used to having the rating report done within 2 hours after the last game, or even faster, actually. But now it might take a little bit longer to rate those games that were played online because we're doing verifications on those games that are played using algorithms, using to the webcam recordings, et cetera, et cetera. So it takes a little bit more time to submit a rating report. So it's not as instantaneous as our players expect. And so that's why we also need to inform and with these new rules that rating reports take a little bit longer. So next slide, please. And so just a final recap that these are the members that were helping with the Chapter 10 rules. They all come from various different committees. So John Haskell, a member at large, David Hayter from the Ethics Committee, Mike Halfpower as the secretary for the committee. I will give credit to Mike, who had to juggle around like 30 different versions of our draft rules. I think we each sent him, various different versions, and he had to merge them, keep track of them to the point where it was, 50 documents almost a week. So Steve Emmett from the Rules Committee, Tina Swice, our member at large, Judith from the Scholastics and Accessibility and Special Circumstances. Ryan is the chair. I'm representing the TDCC committee, and John Haskell was mentioned again. So with that, Ryan and Mike, is there anything else you want to elaborate from the EB side, or is that?
Yes, one thing
Okay.
that Alan sent to me in a message that makes a lot of sense to bring up. Keep in mind, obviously, we're hoping that everyone will pass this because we put a lot of work into it, but vote how you feel is important. But in order for us to be able to implement these rules this year, we have to have an 85% majority to implement. Our goal is to implement by September 1st, to give people some time to receive the rules and go over them. They'll have about a week and a half to 2 weeks by that point. So just keep that in mind as you determine what you want to do.
And when we created the motion, we didn't want to wait till January 1st because we know that there's so many online tournaments being held right now. And so delaying the implementation for January 1st seems, just nonsensical. So basically we in the motion stated that if this is passed, it will be implemented by September 1st, which is different from all the various rule changes that we had in the past. So it's not perfect, but it's something. And then we hope that, in the future years, there'll be more ADMs to correct the document. So.
Yeah, if I may, Brian,
Mm-hmm.
I urge the delegates to view these rules as an initiative by your online play task force to get something out there to directors and organizers that they can really use and implement right now, and that we can use this next year quite literally as a laboratory for learning more about online chess, and that by this time next year, this whole year gives Steve Emmett 365 days to come up with a couple hundred ADMs for our next meeting. But, in all seriousness, I really think that getting this out now to the directors and organizers and even players gives us all in US chess something that we can not only implement, but also enforce and learn from as we go forward. And I think it's very important for that reason that this thing be passed, with that 85% supermajority. So I would urge the delegates to pass this. Thank you.
And I'm going to also queue up Alex Relia's comment in chat. We very, very recently had a change to the rules that we've put out. Basically, our original plan was to allow for a 2-week period before you submit your tournament so that you can do all of your checking. And then some people wanted to be able to put their event, or they wanted to submit their event for rating before doing all or completing all the checking, because players are generally used to that happening. Well, in the last town hall, the vote was 30 to 0 to 3, meaning 3 people abstained, in favor of allowing a grace period of time for tournament directors to submit their report first. If they find cheaters or nefarious play occurred within a 2-week window, then they can go back and make changes without submitting an ethics complaint. That was both to help the ethics committee kind of not have a million cases show up, and it kind of gives some time for organizers to correct things, and it also allows for organizers to rate things quickly. But in the end, we settled on a 3-week period with no extensions. So you get 3 weeks to go back in and make changes. Of course, you have to contact the office when you do that.
And that is an office policy, Ryan, not part of the rule.
Yeah, correct. Thank you for that correction. That is true. That is the current office policy that we agreed to implement. So I think the slide that we had before was slightly incorrect on that, but the 3-week rule is the correct rule.
Yeah, the frequently asked questions has been updated. So on slide number 15, if you have the slide set, slide number 15, it's frequently asked questions 3 and 4 under anti-cheating. It covers that.
Yeah. Okay, Brian.
So I guess I now open the floor to any questions or comments.
Absolutely.
So feel free to raise your hand. So
Looks like Alan has his hand up.
okay. So I'll recognize Alan.
There, I got myself unmuted. Yeah, here's, if this passes, let's say there's a 60% vote in favor. The procedure that happens then is it has to be brought up again at the next delegates meeting with no changes to be voted on. And if it has a majority vote, then it'll become part of the rules the next year. So that's kind of why it's pretty important to go ahead and get the 85% now, because we have a need to have these rules in place. And, if it comes up at 78%, it just waits till the next meeting and has to come up with absolutely no changes, and it gets voted on a second time. So that was to try to keep rules from being thrown in there at the last minute without tremendous amounts of thought and having a lot of unintended consequences. In this case, we've had a task force working on it for some time, thinking a lot about the consequences, having people comment, having these events and things. So it's not like somebody's trying to draft a rule on the floor. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Alan. So I would recognize now Gerald Luston. So there it is. Unmute.
I remember that rules changes require a supermajority, but I don't remember it being as high as 85%. Is that in the bylaws?
My understanding is that's a new rule that we had. I think it was in Norfolk when it passed. Basically, the idea was to prevent people from bringing up, do you touch the king or the rook every year for castling? I think that was kind of the idea behind the rule, if I remember correctly. But yeah, I think it was 85%. I think Alan's right about that.
Wow, I remembered 75%. Okay, and I was even at Norfolk, so.
There you go. Ken Ballou.
I'd like to make 2 points. The first is that several years ago, and I think it may have even been before Norfolk, but I'm not sure, the rule that was set, it's a standing rule, Rules changes need a 2/3 minimum majority, supermajority in 2 consecutive years with no change to the text of the rules to pass, or 85% in one meeting to be able to pass without waiting for a second point, for a second meeting. The other point that I would like to make is also to discourage the delegates from reflexively referring the changes to the Rules Committee for this rule. Typically, that's what happens if rules are proposed. They're just automatically referred to the Rules Committee. Steve Emmett has represented the Rules Committee quite ably on the task force. He has kept the Rules Committee up to date with what has happened. We have seen and reviewed and commented on the various drafts that have happened. And so I think there's absolutely no point or reason to referring to the Rules Committee. We've already done our work on this, and we do strongly encourage that the delegates adopt this with an 85% margin.
And I would add, Ryan, that even before the online play task force was formed, the Rules Committee saw the initial draft of this document that had been put together, largely as a result of a conversation between myself and then Ken online, and as well as with Tim Just. And we all agreed that this was sorely needed because not only had times changed, but technology had evolved so rapidly. And of course, the COVID crisis was upon us, and everybody was wanting to play online chess, and directors didn't have rules that they could really enforce. It was sort of the Wild West in terms of the guidelines.
And so, Ken, may I ask just a point of information, just to emphasize, this is speaking as the rules chair, that you do not want to see this document back as referred to the Rules Committee, correct? Oh, the mutants. Oh, there we go. Let me recognize Ken again. Yes.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. I'm speaking on behalf of the Rules Committee.
Okay, just making sure. So,
Yeah, thank you.
all right. So I will see Garrett Scott. So.
Yes, I would like to suggest that at the meeting, whomever is in the chair, make it clear whether or not it's 85% of those voting or 85% of those in attendance, because I can see some people just sort of relaxing and saying, I'm not into this, I won't even vote. And I want to make sure we get the number of votes that we need to have this passed.
I want to refer to Ken as a parliamentarian. So, Ken, sorry, need your expertise again on this.
Yes, as with almost all votes, it's 85% of those voting. So, for example, if 5 were to vote in favor, 1 were to vote abstain, 1 were to vote no, and everybody else votes abstain, even though there are only 6 votes, it's 85+%. If I did the arithmetic correctly, otherwise add another yes vote.
Okay. So I believe that answers Mr. Scott's question. All right.
Yes.
So David Day is recognized.
As I read through the rules, and I really appreciate the time and effort that went into it, I know there was a thought before that there really kind of had to be a TD at every location when this was happening. And it seems to me like the committee's really moved us towards the direction of a kind of a range of possibilities that for relatively I don't want to use the word simple or lower events, but for events without significant prizes, it seems like it might be reasonable to just have the one TD and mostly rely on the platform on up to more complicated events where there may be double zoom cameras and multiple TDs in multiple locations. Have I missed the boat completely, or am I correct that much of the intent was to really create that whole range of possibilities for TDs?
Yeah, and that's back to the hierarchy. So, ideally we will like every player to have a TD right next to them, so we know that they're not doing things funny on their computer. So that range is there. The lower, I want to say what you're saying, the lower attendance or the smaller events, those are like your club events where all your players, you guys are all friends, And you're not even using the algorithms. You're just saying that, hey, we're all friends. We're never going to cheat each other. So we're going to submit this 4-player round robin or something. So that is why there's a hierarchy in terms of, yes, we want every site to have a tournament director. But then, if you can't fulfill that, then there's a next step, which was the having webcam remote monitoring. And then you can't do that, then let's just do the server algorithms for fair play analysis. And if you can't even do that, then hopefully it's a small event where everybody knows each other. So those are like your 4 hierarchy on being a TD as for online chess tournaments. So
can I ask one follow-up
yeah,
question
sure,
on the algorithms? One scenario, this may not be a fair question. I know that the algorithms are certainly skilled in catching people who are playing at a computer-esque level, for lack of a better term. One of the things I think we're going to start to see is some elementary events with players all rated well below 1,000, where candidly they're not. Many of them would not be capable of playing at even a 1,1700 level without some type of assistance. Is there anyone on the call who's able to speak to maybe the ability of the algorithms to detect that type of assistance, that type of cheating?
Yeah, this Mike Hoffpower, the algorithms, understand, they're written to understand that Mike Hoffpower plays as a 1,200 player or an 800 player or 1,600 player, and so they're ready to look for play that is completely out of character. Unfortunately, or it's just a hard fact from a statistical perspective that really one game in and of itself doesn't necessarily make a case. It's a series of play where over multiple games a player has played, well in advance of what their rating level is. But it's not going to differentiate between, well, I'm an 1,000 rated player in that game, or those games I played at a 1,300 level. It's not going to differentiate like that, because the algorithms are looking for a level of standard deviation that is pretty high. In other words, that there's, the probability of the cheating occurring is well above 95%, that it's in the 99% range, which is where you start getting into about 4 sigma standard deviations. So it can be pretty intense, because the guidance that was given to the teams of individuals from the ratings committee, the statistical experts from the ratings committee that have been looking under the hood using and through a non-disclosure agreement process so far with both chess.com and with ICC, and they're about to start the process with another vendor. But those individuals have been told, we're not comparing algorithms among vendors. That's in their methods. That's not the issue. The issue is whether or not, from their perspective, the algorithm provides the capability to have a high reasonable detect capability, and at the same time a low probability of false detection. So it's looking for those 2 sets of criteria, and what are the techniques that the vendor uses to avoid getting caught in those kinds of problematic situations. And they use considerably different techniques. It's not all just a computer running in the background checking engine moves. There's several different techniques that defenders we're finding are using, and they're using them successfully.
Yep, and I want to call fellow OTPF John Haskell. He was the chief TD of the National Invitationals for the states, and he was had maybe a comment or two about his experience with fair play analysis. So.
It was difficult even with two Zoom cameras on each player. You cannot necessarily detect whether they're doing things they shouldn't be doing. And in for the national invitationals, we did get feedback. We did get reports from chess.com as something looked unusual. And then we also had the games analyzed by Ken Regan. But the Zoom cameras alone or cannot necessarily detect if a player goes to the restroom. We can't see if they're doing something they shouldn't be doing in their homes. So it's difficult.
And that is a very substantial part of the reason why online ratings are kept separate from the regular ratings over the board. Just because of this. We all know, those of us that are directors, when we're at a tournament, and those of us that are players, when you're at a tournament, the directors are watching for things. And a lot of us that are experienced, like Brian and I and Alan, know when something funny's going on. There's the shape of the cell phone in the pocket for the kid who just came back from the bathroom. It's not even supposed to have the cell phone in the pocket. Those things you can identify, and another player can see them, but you can't see that over the board. I mean, an online play, which is a very, very significant part of the reason why those two ratings are kept separately.
All right. So next hand I see is Richard Kipke. So.
Yeah, just real quick. I'm curious about the algorithm. Is it looking across, let's say, how many games is it looking at? What sample size is looking to try to determine whether someone is cheating versus someone who's just improved? Particularly if you're talking about scholastic players. You could see a jump in play, essentially, just as a natural development of a player. And so I'm thinking, or it could be the guy just got lucky and the right opening just happened to fall in front of him and he played much higher at a level, simply because he knew that particular opening really well.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, what's the sample size it's looking at? And how do you differentiate true cheating from, what could be either luck or just, improved play?
Good question. Judith, do you have a comment on this? Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that one of the platforms, they use all the statistics they have. So the more the player plays at any platform, they will be able to have a better judgment on their evaluation. I also know that the evaluation actually sometimes or often skips the opening part, because that can be really book. The first 5-10 moves, it's not a judgment of the ability of the player really, because if they happen to have the opening that they just practiced, it's easy. So the evaluation probably puts more emphasis on the middle game and end game. They also combine the time movement, the time it takes the player to move, and the complexity of the game. So the whole algorithm, while I haven't actually looked at it, but I was told several times that it actually takes into the player's whole history into account, not just that tournament, as well as it's a complex process. And the process knows that the opening, we shouldn't draw a lot of conclusion in the opening.
Yeah, some of the algorithms now are getting to the point where the vendor can tell whether or not the player's mouse cursor is in the window where the chessboard is, or whether it's moved to something else, or the camera that's looking at the player's face can detect constant head and eye movement to some other part of the room or another part of the general area where the player is facing. So if I'm constantly, instead of looking at the camera like I'm doing now, if I'm constantly looking over here and then looking back and looking over here over and over, if somebody's stupid and wants to have their email up and reading it, as far as we know, they may be just getting emails that are telling them what move to make. They don't necessarily have to have an engine running, because the games are online. So somebody could be broadcasting to them, what move it is to make. But but in general, the algorithms, the statistical parts of the algorithms are looking for trends across a series of games, largely played in the same tournament, is where it's looking for them.
And I would say
are there ways to beat that? I'm sure somebody's going to figure some stuff out.
Do you know that I will say that the U.S. Chess, with the compliance letters, right, that were posted on the homepage for right now, currently chess.com and ICC, we had the best statisticians look at those, and they probably had to sign some NDA forms to look under the hood. So that's why, even I don't even know what kind of fair play, like what's the actual algorithm. So But do know that
we heard several times that the more games a player play at platform, the more accurate the decision will be.
Yeah.
We were told several times, so I can make the conclusion that I think that's correct, right?
Yeah, and definitely Judith and I, we've probably seen some 3,000 rated players. So it's pretty conservative on detecting cheaters, and 3,000 players, even Magnus Carlsen isn't 3,000 rated. So, all right, next.
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, maybe. So next up is Andy Ray. Andy?
Yes, I'm here. Had to click the unmute.
No worries. Good to see you.
So, anyways, I have two questions. One's actually they're both sort of technical. It's been mentioned that algorithms reflect a series of games. Well, I play in 2 leagues and direct in 1, and those are 1 game a month. So is our algorithm going to be timed well enough to take and look at a 1 game sample as a starter and then look at a series of games that are spaced over a period of months?
That's your first question, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Andy, it depends on because if the director is only using the algorithm from the vendor only sees the games that are being played in that particular tournament in general. If there's something that's suspicious in 1 or more of those games, and the vendor has access to games that were played in previous tournaments, then there may be a way to go back. But in general, that's what you're describing doesn't happen. That would be more likely to come up in terms of you as a player or the director submitting a claim. And as part of the claims process, that director is pulling in that evidence and getting it to someone like Professor Regan to take a closer look at, so that this game in this tournament, these 3 games in that tournament, and those 2 games from last weekend are together forming a pattern, as opposed to, so the algorithm itself are not, if the game's not online, there's no algorithm's going to catch it. It's just not there. So if the games are played just at some club tournament, the algorithms don't know that stuff exists unless the game is online and online with one of these vendors that we have. So, and there's been, to my knowledge, there's not really been any substantive discussions among the vendors with the.
Oh, guess he cut out.
And I.
Oh, okay. So I was, yeah, go ahead,
so
Sherry.
There's 2 types of tournaments, right? You can run as a whole tournament on a platform, even if you run it once a week. But then you have the tournaments where you just challenge each other, right? But they don't fall into one tournament ID or so. So those, when you just challenge each other and you manually pair on your computer and you give out the pairings, and either the players are challenge each other or you match them up, those are harder to detect for the platform because they are not under one tournament. So then you have to be a little bit more proactive and contact the platform to run a number of games under one event that you tell them it's one event. Does it make, hopefully it makes sense.
Next up is Louis Reed.
And I had a second.
Oh, Andy, let's go ahead and raise your hand again and we'll come around. So.
Yes.
Good.
I also had a question with regards to the touch move rule.
Yeah, Andy, go ahead and raise your hand a second time around. We're going to go.
I said I had 2 questions and I had 47 seconds left.
Fair enough.
So I would like to ask my second question.
Go ahead.
47 seconds.
All right, go ahead, Andy.
It's so, anyways, there's a matter of the touch move rule, and it's very easy to take and slide the pieces around. Where not so much sliding the pieces around, but you can touch a piece, go to move to the square, and say, "Oh my gosh, that's a terrible move." Take back because you haven't actually made that move. Okay,
right.
So is there any more enforcement that we'll be able to get, which with the help of technology, obviously, to where players aren't able to do that?
I'll take that one.
Yeah, that's Ryan's factor.
Yeah, technically, Probably that could happen technologically if vendors wanted to allow, like if you click a piece, then now you must move it. Like that technology is there if they wanted to implement it. But the truth is you just can't know. And one of the things, like I started off with, is this is one of those moments where online chess is just different than over the board chess. And we just have to kind of accept some things about that. Another example of something that's different is the concept of pre-move. Like if you and I were playing, Andy, and it's your turn, I could play a move on my screen, and then when you make your move, my move is automatically executed. Now, that's a risk for me. Like maybe my move is automatically executed and it's just fine, or maybe you did something I didn't expect and suddenly my move is terrible. But the rules that we've written would basically uphold the fact that the player chose to do those kinds of things. So this is an area where like touch move or touch take or anything like that, this is just different online versus over the board. And so that's why we have written the rules that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I mean, we didn't contradict the touch move rule. We just used a different rule, which was a 10G accidental release of a piece in terms of like mouse slips. You know, there's no takebacks. You know, you didn't play your intended move, but you accidentally dropped your piece. You know, in between there. So that's why the intent was also not to contradict chapter 1 rules as much. So I thought we had Louis Reed. Did we have Louis Reed?
We did have, yeah, we did have Louis.
All right, I'm going to unmute him since he was there. So, Louis?
Hi. Okay, so my question just revolved around the recently played elementary online championship. It was my understanding that the players were given one-time use Chess Kid IDs just for that tournament.
Yep.
So how would an algorithm base it? Basically, there's no history now on this particular player.
So I was one of the section directors, tournament directors, directing the various sections. And I'll say that the Chess Kid or Chess.com Fair Play team definitely were able to catch, even if it's brand new. And you can definitely tell. So an example would be like if the computer moves were matching 99% of the time. Rating was about 3,000 within just 4 games. So they were so good to the point where it was like, okay, we can tell and we can throw out players. Out of the 7 rounds, we were able to throw out some at move round 4, some around round 5. But we were able to close their session. They can't log back in and just kick them out of the tournament because of the fair play analysis. Of course, I can't speak about ongoing cases right now because it's not official. I would say the chief TD will and the organizers will be going over that. But I was only just a section TD for that tournament. So and thanks, David, for the birthday wish. So, all right, Alan, let's.
Well, I want to expand a little on the fair play. I don't have current information, but I once did do some programming for one of the vendors, so I can speak with a little bit of knowledge. What Judith said about past events, those are used if available, and one of the reasons they're very useful is to avoid false positives, because by looking at a history, you can distinguish between an improving player and a player who just all of a sudden jumps in rating. It's especially important with kids. Some of them do jump 200-300 points in rating over a few weeks. And the other thing is, all of the vendors keep their algorithms secret to avoid people gaming them, but they all have more or less the same principles, and they, from what I've seen, you know, they're very good. They're not perfect, but they're going to catch a lot, and they're also very good as a disincentive. As more and more people do get thrown out for these things, more people are going to realize that it's just not worth trying to cheat. There will some that will never realize that, but many will.
Did you have any questions, else by chance, or?
No, I just wanted to.
Fair enough.
Yeah, since I actually had I'd actually seen some of that code. I thought I could actually add a little bit.
All right, thank you, Al. So, Any other questions, comments? Where?
I think Steve Morford has a comment. He literally raised his hand.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Go ahead if you can unmute him. I didn't see him on the webcam. So.
I just saw his hand go up. I was just happened to be in the right spot.
Thank you. Real quick.
Hi.
Is the intent to basically only have the online play with vendors that are approved or recommended by US Chess? And if not, or in other words, are you going to have an option for local clubs to do things outside these vendors? I'm just trying to understand what the overall structure is going to be.
Yeah, this Mike, we have US Chess looking under the hood at vendors who are online providers simply to add a level of confidence for a tournament director selecting that vendor to be used for the service that the vendor provides. But a director has the authority to say, I'm going to use, the tinaschweiss.com, online chess system that isn't certified or anything. But then so now it's in the hands of the director to make sure the director has a mechanism in place to check the games that are being played, because the director is just, potentially increasing the risk of the integrity of the tournament that they're holding when they're holding it on a site that hasn't really been professionally reviewed. So it can be done, yes. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that.
It's obviously risky to have that option. Is this partly a capacity issue right now, or is that a cost issue? I mean,
cost issue for whom?
Well, probably for the local organizers in that case. What's the long-term plan? Is
there's
the
platforms that are free to use. There's platforms that are free to use. So there's not even a cost for using the platform.
Yeah, until complaints start going up through the system.
So,
that'd be my observation.
Now you talk what system? The US Chess system?
Sure, you're going to start getting ethics complaints. You're going to get.
Okay, so I'll let Ryan. I'd recommend we let David talk to that particular aspect.
I agree, because he's on the ethics committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple Davids that are on the ethics committee here.
True.
I guess I'm the stucky on this one. The ethics committee is preparing to be overrun with ethics complaints. We are aware of many things that have happened recently, and we are aware that many complaints are being prepared. So they're going to get quite busy. A complaint that is filed, in order to file an ethics complaint, it comes with a $50 refundable fee. So the person that files the fee has to pay $50, a good faith fee. And assuming the complaint is not frivolous, so they don't even have to be ruled in favor of, they get their money back. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of complaints coming in. Organizers are not required, nor are directors required to submit a complaint, but they have to, that's a decision they have to make. So I'm seeing a question here, how reliable is the fair play detection? Well, you've got two letters that have been done, one for chess.com and one for ICC, that say the system is very reliable. It's very reliable in, as we said, catching people that have cheated and not catching people, not accusing people falsely. I can tell you that the ethics committee has had significant discussions on things like what kind of evidence do we need, so all that is being done by the ethics committee.
And I think the question was more so that is the ethics committee accepts these as an evidence, the vendor's fair play detection algorithm, and then if it's positive, will the ethics committee?
That is an ongoing discussion right now within the ethics committee. What the ethics committee accepts is whatever is put before it. then the ethics committee has the responsibility of evaluating and adjudicating the evidence. And presumably they would give weight to anti-cheating algorithms that have been, I don't know if I want to use the word certified, but at least have been looked at and determined to be valid. And I may, we may want to let David Day join in this discussion as he's the current chair of the ethics committee.
True. Let me find David.
To make sure that I'm not speaking out of turn here.
No, I agree with what Colonel Hayter's saying. I mean, the ethics committee is certainly going to accept what these algorithms say as evidence. As to how much weight they're going to give that evidence, well, the ethics committee does not comment on hypotheticals, and it's going to depend on the total facts and circumstances in any individual case. But the committee's certainly not going to ignore the evidence.
All right. So thank you, David. Both Davids, David Day and David Hayter. So, all right. I saw Danny Rode for the question. So.
Yeah, more sort of two comments. One is about education, and we all have to educate the players on what the expectations are leading into all of these events. What is the goal? What is in mind? And I think that we have to give them guidance as to what can happen to you. And I think that leads to the second part, which is enforcement. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be the ethics committee. It can be your own self as an organizer, and you can choose to simply not allow someone to play in your tournaments, regardless of whether there's an ethics complaint or not. It's from what I've seen, a lot of people are complaining about not the lack of enforcement, and that's their concern with online play. So I kind of want everyone here to almost appreciate where people are when it comes to this. And it's probably a select few, but we have to be here for the masses of people, especially our young players, and really just say, we are trying to get these rules done on behalf of most of our community who doesn't cheat. We have to just do it. So I'm on education and enforcement, and that's all I kind of wanted to say.
Okay. And
can I comment on that for just a second, please?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So, and I understand, that there are people saying that the enforcement's not happening. I get that, and I've heard that. My comment would be, as a member of both rules and ethics, cases take a while to get through the system, and that will probably be happening at some point in the future. I think part of the reason that folks may say that the enforcement isn't happening is because they're not seeing immediate results. And I see that in tournaments that I've directed, where a player says, I complained, my opponent's guilty, he needs to be thrown out before the next round. Well, it doesn't happen that way. And if it goes before ethics, you're talking every player every participant in the stage gets 30 days to answer. There's 4 stages. That's 4 months. So there's going to be a time latency between the time of the complaint and when you see results. And I do believe that in the future, people will be seeing some enforcement, and it will be happening.
And it is brand new territory in terms of like the demand of online chess. That's definitely ramped up for sure in this past 6 months. So, all right, we will now recognize Mr. Larson.
I actually had a student that this happened to fairly recently. And as for enforcement, I believe the service providers themselves do a great deal of enforcement in this area. I believe it's typical that if a player is caught by the fair play detection mechanisms, they're banned from the site unless they perform some kind of contrition. Is this not true? Yeah, that's what I thought.
So I'm not sure who that was, but so yeah, various servers have their own policies. Even if you're not playing a US chess rated tournament, you can be banned for other things. So same thing like how U.S. chess members should be in good standings. The various service providers will have something to the fact where you need to be in good standings. Be not even just playing fairly, but also your chats to other members have to be cordial, can't be abusive. So there's a various also on the service provider end user agreement policies that users are also subject to. I'm seeing also a case where they get banned, they make a new account, they get banned, they make a new account, and now what they do is I guess they track your either IP address because you're registering the same account over and over again, or even it gets to the point where they can even track maybe your computer hardware. So they know that you're playing, like right now, this is Asus, and I'm always coming from Kansas City and registering on this laptop. So different various mechanisms for that. So, all right. Is there any other questions, comments about the Chapter 10 draft rules? Could be anything. This time is open to the delegates. So, oh, Alan's up.
Yeah, just one further thing on what you said is when we're talking about USCF or US chess rated tournaments, they have to have their US chess ID in there. And so even if I could get around the fair play rules at chess.com or IC Internet Chess Club by registering under an alias, I can't use that alias to play with the same USCF ID that was used by someone who's already been banned. So again, I think the cumulative effect will be to definitely have consequences for anyone caught cheating.
Yeah. Okay, so, all right, thank you, Al. Any additional raise of hands? I'm checking the webcams to make sure that you guys are not physically raising your hand, but there is a button down at the bottom of the screen that says raise your hand if you would like to make a comment or discussion topic. So yeah, we're definitely here to answer any questions here. So not just me, but the rest of the task force. So okay. So I guess we have some backup questions, but just a friendly reminder, we have about roughly 38 minutes before the end of this meeting. At the end of this meeting, the intent is we would like to do a straw poll via the Zoom software in terms of basically asking whether or not at the moment would you like to pass the Chapter 10 draft rules and make them actual rules. Hopefully by the 85% majority when we get to the actual delegates meeting. Ryan, I think what I saw from the Slack channel, we did have like a friendly amendment from Mr. Kimbaloo. Basically the reference of the official rules of chess versus the rules of chess and making that more consistent. So I think that's the only change.
Judith offered one earlier in chat to me personally.
Oh, okay.
Let me scroll back.
The submission in the Rule 15 in Chapter 10, it is saying that the directors has up to 2 weeks that it's in the rules, so we have to amend that.
Yeah.
To match with the office policy.
And I don't know if that might be something where we say, do we have to amend that to office policy, or because it might be changing, right? Or
no,
is that
no. If it's listed in the rules, it does need to change because it is conflicting with the office policy, is her point, and I agree that we could probably handle that with a friendly amendment.
The rule is about how long you have to submit the rating report. The rule is not about how long you have to submit a change to the rating report.
Actually, yeah, you bring up a good point.
So you have 2 weeks.
That's true.
You have up to 2 weeks to submit the rating report, and you can ask for an extra week and provide a rationale to the office. And the way the office policy relates to the fact that, hey, I submitted my tournament quickly because I wanted to get the rating report in so that the ratings could get updated as part of the supplement. Okay, so I submitted my report quickly, but still within 3 weeks of the event, I now discovered that that guy, Alan Losoff, who played my tournament, was cheating. Okay, So I submit a change, a one-time change to the office within that 3-week window without having to go through the ethics process to say I want to turn all those games into forfeit losses, for that player.
But the announcement actually said Executive Board has approved the 3-week period for an ending date of an event for the submission of the online event rating report. So the announcements say that you have 3 weeks to submit your event. So I think we will have a little bit of work, but it should be fun. Just a nuance.
I think regardless of what we do, we can definitely gather our thoughts on it
Yeah.
and make the right decision and then offer a friendly amendment, because I don't think that's a big deal. It's just changing a number, basically.
Yeah, and
We'll figure out the best way.
Asking if we should remove the whole rule, I don't think so, because then it would allow organizers just simply to delay the rating of the event indefinitely, and that's never a good idea. So I think it's good. I think we try to write a rule to allow organizers the flexibility of submitting right away. So if, as it mentioned, we have a small round robin and everyone knows everyone, you can submit the tournament right away. Like I did with 3 GMs and 3 IMs, we knew that they weren't cheating, so I submitted very fast. But then you have the other end where 2 weeks is barely enough. So I'm welcoming that 3 weeks actually, because it's a lot of work, especially if you have a huge tournament. You're going to need those days to go through the games and make sure that everyone is good.
Okay. So first, I'm going to Alex. I'm going to recognize Alex Rea. I just wonder which part are you mentioning? Yeah, you want to get rid of the whole 15, or just which particular section? I guess if you can clarify for us, please. Thank you, Alex.
Just the part about the 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I mean, that's
Okay.
That's an office policy. It should be done by the office. We don't want to. Let's say we want to change it from 3 weeks to 2 weeks. We really don't want to get 85% of the people to vote to change that. It's very simple for Carol to just tell her people, this is where we're going to change it to 3 weeks to 25 days or whatever is necessary.
Okay, so and for those who are referencing the draft rules, which I was looking to the right to my desktop computer, basically it's Rule 15A that's questioned, and I guess the wording I asked Ryan, the chair, in terms of changing it before the special delegates meeting. Is that possible? We can work out the wording so it reflects that, or?
That is more a question for Ken Ballou, because he is more experienced with that.
That's true. Let's recognize Mr.
Oh, sorry, I was co-host, so I just unmuted myself. Brian, the answer is that any motion on the agenda may be amended before it's brought up for discussion on the floor, provided that the amendment is germane.
Yeah, I think that this fits the bill for that. So
This is definitely not a radical change, because we're just trying to not conflict with the office policy. So I would say,
okay,
and
so
that
that
would be,
sounds like what we'll do.
I guess that would be amending that part. So 15A, 2 weeks to 3 weeks. Just writing notes to myself as well. So for our future discussions. So, and I am telling a couple people who are leaving a little bit early. They're telling me that they are going to vote in a particular way before. So, but I'll add that to the final count as well. So, a question from, let me see here, Mr. Larson. Okay, so 11A. I'm going to pull that up. Is that the hierarchy by chance, or? Let's see here.
Yeah, so 11A states, or actually 11A C, A1C, right?
Mm-hmm.
A variation of 3 game or move data for all unfinished games is not available. As soon as possible, the director shall restart all games from move 1 with the players paired according to the round's original pairing. all players shall have the full time control and are not eligible to make the moves made in their prior games.
And so actually, the idea is hopefully we want people to use 11A1, allowing the unfinished games to continue. I think Judith and Tina definitely had experience on this the last weekend, where, you know, thankfully we had the screenshots of all those games that when the server crashed, we
And
had
actually,
stills on that.
This is a really good example what we had in that event, because we went through, whenever we had the positions, we restarted from the known position.
Yep.
Wherever we didn't have the known position, then we had to just restart the games from the beginning. So it was...
Right, we had position agreed by both players, but maybe they were not sure about the clock time. So then we were like, okay, what do you guys are okay with this clock time? So Tina, did you have any to add? And from the seniors, I definitely know there was a lot of games that I had to restore.
When the server crashed, it was, you know, the kids kind of, if they were in the middle of a round, they kind of knew instinctively to just grab a screenshot, and the seniors not so much. So a lot of them were trying to refresh, and it ended up resetting the games to, you know, starting position. So a few of them were able to grab screenshots. And then, you know, one of the things we wrote into the rules was that you're allowed to take paper notation, but you can't use it to make a claim in your game, but you can use it to reconstruct a game. And we reconstructed a lot of games from paper notation in the senior section. We also allowed one player to pull out a, they're typing into the chat on Zoom, and he said, can I pull out a reconstruction board, a physical board, and put the position and reconstruct the position there. Well, we allow that even, you know, in a regular tournament, if some kid throws up on the board or something, you know, so like, you know, so it says, yeah, go ahead. So he pulled out a board and he set up the position. He took a picture of it. He emailed it to me. So, you know, one grandmaster said, well, I got the game in my head. Can I just send you the moves? And I was sure, you know, as long as the opponents agree to it once we relaunch the game, that was the position. So we used a lot of different methods, and we're able to get every single game reconstructed. We didn't have to start any of them over. So,
and some of the seniors agreed to take draws. It was kind of like during the last round of last year's US Open, when the last round had that long delay.
Yeah, in Madison, or Middleton. So let's see. I'm trying to see. My point is a TD tip wording. Unless this is, let me take a look here.
And I just, while Brian's doing that, I just wanted to give a special shout out to Brian for saving a lot of the games, especially in the barber section.
Yeah.
When that happened, there was only one game in the Rockefeller when that occurred. And luckily, I was on that Rockefeller thing, so we had all the games saved. But constructing those games was not easy, but managed to make it happen.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, those FEN codes were a little bit tricky.
Save some games, and it was actually reflected in the article that was just posted. Right?
Oh, nice. Yeah, the FEN codes were very tricky because I also forgot to allow sometimes castling because they were in the beginning parts of the game. But and yeah, in terms of the TD tip, I see nothing wrong in terms of the wording because the idea is that if the service provider is not clicking the moves, then you can't use 11A1 to basically restore the game from the last save position. So yeah, the server crash that Judith, Tina, and I experienced, we couldn't recover the games. So we had to generate a FEN code and then send a match command for them to play at these various time controls with the correct FEN code, which had, to be restarted like once or twice because I forgot to maybe allow castling on one side, or I've switched whose move it is, white's move or black's move. So, but yeah, TD tips, I guess from the parliamentarian, it also is not subject to editing by the delegates. So strictly the rules are in the delegates, and the TD tips are just editorial remarks, which I mean, I'll admit the events one, I'll say it for the record, I was the only one against that long TD tip. So I know, but I mean, I was looking at that, I was like, why is it this long? It's like 2 pages worth. So But definitely I couldn't change it before, so I tried. So
Well, part of the rationale for the really long one too was it provides a lot of examples of stuff that people may not be thinking about. I do not expect that TD tip to live forever, but at least for the immediate future, it probably needs to be in there.
and my comment was not to delete it completely, get rid of it completely, but more or less provide it as a separate document, so it's out of the rule book because. Well, I can't reach it because I'm kind of constrained by these headphones, but the rule book right behind me is already too long for, in my opinion. So.
Let me point out one more thing about what can and organizers can or cannot do, or TDs can or cannot do. Every platform is different, and every platform has different levels of organizer access, as far as I know. So it's not necessary that you, with your access, can do something that, for example, some other organizers can do. So always double check with the platform. If you have a contact at your platform that you prefer, please double check what you can or cannot do. For example, can you match up players? Can you impose time penalty? Can you restart games with fan codes? All these little nuances. I think the more you educate yourself about the platforms, your chosen platform's ability and what you can do or cannot do, the better your event will be. So, well, TD tip.
All right. Monitoring the chat or any other comments or questions on Chapter 10 rules?
If there's not, I'm not seeing anyone raising their hands literally either. I checked for that. If there's not, we could do our poll. There it is. Okay, the poll's there. Oh, I can't vote. Yeah, anyone who's a host or co-host can't vote. That's okay, though. We can add our votes afterwards. I will be will definitely approve. That is my
Me
vote.
too, for the record.
Yeah. The two people who had to leave a little bit early, they said yes. So we'll just count their votes accordingly. So as yes, so in terms of approval. So
sure.
Yeah, it is a long document, but it is a completely new Chapter 10. It's just not, little segments as well. So
Steve has chosen a sixth option of I vote definitely yes. Looks like there's one person who hasn't voted so far.
35 in the call. Oh, minus the.
Yeah.
Not counting the co-hosts,
Yep.
with the people who are able to actually vote on the poll. But that's okay. I think we can.
So please go read the document.
Yeah.
Ah, there we go. Okay.
7. So we have 17 to 2 to 4, and then another 2 for. We'll just put them likely to approve. So.
To share the results, right?
Yep. So 19 were likely to approve, 2 likely to vote to approve, and 4 is undecided.
And the OPTF members also get a vote, and I'm assuming they're all mostly voting yes. I don't think anyone's voting no. So.
Yeah, I didn't count those. Yeah.
Yeah.
So strictly non-co-host voting here. So that's the vote.
So please
no one's saying no either.
Oh,
I mean,
20,
some people are
sorry.
saying they need to read more.
Yeah, Kim Blue for 20. So 20 to 2 to 4 is with Kim Blue added. So thank you, Ken. And let's see here. Okay. And to those 4 who voted as such, is it just you haven't read the documents left, or is there any discussion that we need to help you? If you have any questions about them so far that you've any readings, feel free to ask a question right now. We still have time.
Yeah, or ask or follow up with an email.
Yep.
To one of us, and we can route the question as necessary. And that's, when the executive board decided to put together this online play task force, we recognized immediately that it needs to call upon expertise from across, the committees in U.S. chess, and that's how we built it. And we put in a lot of hours. I mean, it was easily 7 hours a week for some people on this, and we did this over the course of about 2 months. So, there's well over 100 hours of cumulative time invested in this. I think is an understatement. It's probably closer to 400 or 500 hours.
Alex wants to ask a question.
So since Brian asked,
yes,
the reason that I voted Harold Winston's favorite needs more thought was because I want to wait and see what the delegates do to this on the floor before making any commitment.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Reasonably sure that there will be attempts to amend this, if not whether successful or not.
Yeah, I mean, amendments are definitely allowed, of course, at this special delegates meeting. But I guess if you have any amendments here that you would like to offer now, or I mean, I'm still monitoring Slack, the Slack channel for the delegates, and so far for at least a chapter, well, it's channel number 9 because we're 09 on the Slack. But
oh darn,
yes, I know. But I'm monitoring the Slack, and there's no discussion at all. I'm standbying. I'm waiting for that.
Well, Brian.
Yeah.
The delegates who are here and the ones who are on Slack are not the ones that I'm worried about making amendments.
Yeah,
that's true.
That's fair enough.
That's true.
So, and I guess we talk about this implementation and education. And Steve, more forward here, yeah, definitely. This is completely new, chapter 10, and also there's a new environment. I say every OPTF member definitely has learned something in directing a tournament. I'm learning basically every week, and all these different styles of how to direct a tournament. So definitely, even though I'm a national TD, I'm supposed to know everything, I don't. I'm still learning. So it's a good opportunity to learn, even if you don't direct online tournaments, or you're trying to start to do that. It's definitely, definitely a good time to start learning. So everybody's pretty much on the same level on that. So, all right, Danny Rode and John Rockefeller. So.
Just like to point out that there might even be a place for a new category of TD. I know it sounds crazy, but online TD. And the reason is because it's very different to handle some of these online situations, and experience will play a part. The more events that you do, the more comfortable that you will be, and the more comfortable that you will be in explaining some of these things. So, and I think we all learn every event that we do. Every event that every next weekend that you're running another tournament, you're learning something different, something that's going to happen on the fly, and just be aware of it, understand it, and do your best to make the proper decision. It's a learning curve for everyone.
I know I have the TDCC chair as well in here, but currently from the TDCC perspective, we are currently only looking at having online tournaments as a TD credit for substitution for the current setting. But they definitely a good point to bring up on just, hey, you're just an online director, different skill set for sure on that respect. Alex, do you have anything to add? I'm going to call it TDCC chair here, so on that, and then I'll also recognize him for his question in a bit. So go ahead.
I do, Brian. That's why I raised my hand.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Actually, Danny, TDCC has been asked in the past to certify TDs for certain things. Historically, it's largely been Scholastic or prize money tournaments, because in general, prize money, you don't have to worry about tie breaks. And we've been very opposed to that. We feel that a TD at a certain level should be able to direct all kinds of tournaments. I suspect if online tournaments are not a passing fancy, we will at some point try to get online requirements for everybody.
And also, it's I mean, not only do we have to consider the new online credit, right? But we also have to think about our TD certification exams, which we'll probably have to include maybe online, not just have to submit a tournament. That was the quote online component for most TDs. But now I think we also have to consider, you know, if we're going to certify this online TD, we also have to certify maybe some exam questions as well to reflect that. So on all the various levels. So.
Which is what I said.
Oh, yep. All right. And Alex, did you have any questions? Okay, no question. Okay. All right. So now back to the raise a hand order, recognizing John Rockefeller.
Brian, when the task force was doing its work, I'm curious whether the issue came up of this is a little bit off topic, but still on topic.
That's okay.
Whether the issue came up of listing players who are found to have cheated in cross tables. Reason being, if they're not, I understand the privacy reasons, but there's presumably going to be a lot more incidences of cheating with online tournaments. And I was wondering if you all put any thought to the notion of whether it might make sense to possibly list players. I know 28I applies, but that's a little different because that really applies more, that's in reply to 28H, which is about players who were probably assigned different rating. So it's not explicitly dealing with failed players. So, you know, I realize this might involve an ADM. It's a whole different process, but I'm wondering if it came up and whether you might have unofficial recommendations as to whether you think with the likelihood of more players being found to have cheated, it would be useful to TDs in particular to be able to access that history.
So first I'm going to recognize David Hayter from the task force to speak about that issue. So,
as I recall, it did not specifically come up in the online play task force. As many of you know, I work for an organization that runs a lot of online tournaments. Our policy has been that we replace folks that are ejected with the tournament with the dummy ID and throw out all the games. That makes it nearly impossible to identify who, in fact, was ejected from the tournament. That's intentional on the organization that I work for. Part of that is privacy. Part of that was a concern over minors, but it makes it hard to, again, process if it comes up with an ethics complaint. My answer would be if the organizer or the TD wants to submit such a complaint, they will, of course, submit the evidence that they know, but that is not in the cross table. I will tell you that this has come up within the ethics committee, and there's different points of view over whether this should or should not be allowed. So part of what we are going through and part of what the online play task force is going through and we are going through as a federation, this is all new uncharted area and we're sort of figuring out what the rules should be. I won't necessarily claim to have it 100% right, and I don't think the committee is claiming that this chapter 10 is 100% right, as they've acknowledged that changes could occur in the future. So this is an issue. Yes, the dummy ID is the 25 million to answer Lewis Reed's question. Yeah. So there may be some other people, and if some other members of the ethics committee want to comment, I certainly don't want to be the only one to, represent, what may or may not be the ethics committee's views.
As well, Judith had this idea of this as well, perhaps. So.
I can just repeat what David said, that we are removing the players for following US chess rules. Whether that's the correct way to handle cheaters or not, that's another topic. I don't think it's relevant for the rules currently in front of us.
Okay. So John, does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, but I was a little more sense of if we've kind of not exactly concluded business, but I was just trying to get a sense of whether if someone who's planning to take it up or a member might take that up as a cause, So it's a little bit outside. I understand it's outside the purview of the task force, but I can imagine is a topic that might come up, if not in your work, generated by others. When you have discussions with others, you go, well, you're going to get all these kids, or a lot of kids, K to 5 kids in particular, cheating, and they're ghosts. They're essentially ghosts in the cross tables. They're not listed. I mean, if you really wanted to deter cheating, you put 0F, 0F, 0F. You're not necessarily saying why this person got a 0F, but people can read between the lines, and there would be a strong deterrent factor. I realize that's outside the purview of what you're doing, but just as a broader conversation, I think that's something we should consider down the road.
And
two quick comments on that.
Okay.
As I said, it didn't come up in the online play task force. It has come up in the ethics committee. So this is going to be a topic for future discussion. And then relative to the deterrence issue, when we have submitted the rating reports and we change the ID to the dummy ID, everybody can see that there's a dummy ID in first place or third place or fifth place. So people.
Yeah, if Dave, you're TD in another tournament and someone says to you, I've heard X about this person, or I'd heard someone say maybe a watch list or whatever. If you do a quick lookup and you see player history, like, oh, this guy got, all right, then there's something to it, as opposed to, I heard that. Well, anyone can hear anything. But
That's right. No, I agree that this needs to be a topic of discussion in the future. It probably has been under discussed. So I agree with that.
Yeah. So thank you, John, for the question. And the only thing I want to remark is I've tried to sometimes submit the 0F, 0F for the player in the cross table. And what the validation checks would do is they would just get rid of the player completely. They're like, don't try to add more players to get over 100 players. It'll just remove it automatically because the player didn't play any games. There's no point of adding the player. And even if you add 0 point buys to all of them, it was just like, nope, this player, player 99 is gone. So but that's my word. Okay. Just a time check also. We have 8 minutes, so please raise your hand if you have any questions, but we have 8 minutes left for this town hall meeting. So recognizing right now, Sophia.
Hi, I just had one recommendation that working through this and seeing some of these online tournaments in action in my apartment, that you really heavily consider professional development for TDs, where you can the current people that are doing these online tournaments take photos of what you're doing, keep notes of what you're doing, so that you can give that positive or negative do's and don't list after you've worked through several of these. Like distant learning, we have a do's and a don'ts now in my school after doing it for 4 months, so that we're ready to know what the pitfalls are and doing a more professional development on this. Because after hopefully we get through the pandemic, I do think online tournaments are here to stay, but maybe in sort of more match-like format or smaller, people playing on iPads or tablets in classrooms as a group with a TD, but still having it, but in slightly different format. And I think the more that you do document yourself, that hopefully these platforms that you're working with will understand your needs, because you're really doing that data, that beta testing that they've always needed.
Okay. So thank you. Mike, just a question to Mike Halper. I think you've ran some TD seminars as well on various topics, correct? And so,
yeah, I mean, and also Chris Bird runs the Thursday night, TD sessions that I would also recommend to any tournament director to dial in for. Because I know, as a member of the executive board, I'm going to work with Alex as a lead at TDCC to give him whatever support he needs to try to enhance the education for tournament directors as for over the board and online play, and support, Alex and his committee in whatever way that he sees fit in terms of, having expertise to write questions potentially for that can go into exams for tournament directors and so forth. So I agree 100% with what Sophia said. We definitely need to, to step up the game in terms of the education on this. It's not just about a bunch of rules. It's about educating people how to apply the rules as well.
Yeah. And I would say, I never had these seminars before. And these are new seminars that were created, I want to say, recently, right? All these workshops and seminars In addition, I think there was also the TD show that's from Chris Bird. That's also started recently too. So definitely didn't have those learning opportunities, but I at least had some good mentors as well around my area to pick their brains and apply their knowledge to over the board and also online tournaments. So let's see here. I'm going to first recognize Danny. So Danny, go ahead.
Just speaking along these lines, I remember after the first meeting on chapter 10, I reached out to a couple of people on the call and I said, here, come to, this TD training thing we're doing for, future events. It was right before the invitationals too. And some of the directors weren't working the events that we were talking about, but it still helped them. So any seminar that you go to, even if it's not for an event that you're working, even if you want to take a look and see, here's what they're doing, how can I do it in my own sort of environment? So take the opportunities that are presented to you and reach out if you've already done events so that you can help more TDs, because really the players are the ones who need these events right now. And a lot of them are stuck at home, not able to play over the board. And we have to do a better job of getting our members more tournaments to play in.
All right. Thank you, Danny, for the comment. Chris Posner had a chat, so I haven't been able to read it. So I'm going to say. We do.
I think that's it, Ryan.
Yeah. So Ryan,
Louis
Lewis
has his hand up.
Oh, okay. Ryan, could you answer? Did you answer to Chris Posner by chance? Oh no, sorry.
Chris
I'm going to
Prosser.
Prosser. Sorry. Thank you. Hello?
You're wanting me
Chris?
to answer a question?
Sorry, I just sent that just to you, Brian.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, privately. Sorry.
We just have a couple local players that generally, just about any time they lose to a lower rated player, it must have been because the player cheated. Do we have some way to deal with players who are routinely, every time they lose a game to someone rated lower than 200 points or 300 points to them, automatically accuse them of cheating to deal with those players?
The one thing that I would do is tell them, unless you have proof, you need to stop making the accusation or I won't let you in my tournament. That's what I would
I
do.
know we do at our tournaments as far as over the board, but online it adds a different dimension because we can't see the game. We can't watch whether they're cheating or not. Some of the cheating's harder to prove.
Most games, or at least the service providers I've seen, most games you can see a direct URL to their games, and that's saved forever. I can access games that were played in March, because I have the link, and that's a unique link to that game. So
is that true for accounts that were deleted? I know on Lee Chess they keep the games around. I don't know about the other platforms.
Yeah, even my games on both platforms, leechess.org and chess.com. I have the URL links to all these games because I may or may not file an ethics complaint. So those games are still there. So
I will also comment, it hasn't happened often in my experience on the ethics committee, but occasionally we have had people, like you say, make overly frequent accusations of cheating. And remember that comes with a $50 good faith fee that will be refunded if the complaint is not frivolous. And it has on occasion, especially when we get a frequent flyer, that, on the second or third iteration of them making a complaint that it has no merit, they've just made a $50 donation to US Chess. And that has happened.
Okay. All right. So last question for the evening, Lewis Reed. Or a comment.
It was more of a comment. It was just regarding the, an online TD. And I think, it's good, maybe because an online TD doesn't have to have, answer questions. They're not doing pairings usually, and they're not, doing adjudications and handling complaints and dealing with noise and all the other things that come with a real over the board tournament.
Yeah. So Judith, did you do any pairings or rulings or answering questions?
Yeah, that's.
Oh, Julie already left. Oh, sorry. All right.
That's very not true. So the tournaments that are being run on Zoom is a constant communication stream with the players chatting to the TD, saying, my mouse slipped and then this happened and my pre-move made my castling messed up. And You know, you can hear everything they're saying. They've got their output turned down, so they're playing in silence, but you can hear every noise they're making. And like, it's definitely, when you're using the Zoom cameras, it's definitely just as interactive as it is on the floor.
I think the only thing that I don't miss is setting up 1,000 boards for nationals. I think that's the only difference between online chess and over the board chess in terms of tournament directors. But definitely, Lewis, that comment is being noted also by our TDCC, Alex Ray. Relia. And so the time is 8:30. Thank you guys for all attending.
I'm going to note one thing just for the sake of the recording. I did receive a communication out, because he's not allowed to be here because we only sent these invitations out to delegates, but Micah Smith did make a suggestion for a TD tip, which I'll relay to the task force later. It's inconsequential for this meeting, but he made a good point. So I'm just putting that in there. I told him I'd mention it tonight. We're good.
Now, I'll correct myself. Time is 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 my time. And so I will enjoy my birthday cake now. So thank you guys for all attending, and see you guys hopefully at this special delegates meeting as well. So take care.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.